In 1492, Muhammad XII surrendered the keys to Granada and rode away from the Iberian Peninsula. Behind him, the gates closed on nearly 8 centuries of Islamic rule in Spain, followed by the forced exile of the region's practicing Muslims and Jews. But before this collapse, medieval Spain, known as Al-Andalus, developed a social fabric called La Convivencia. This term describes a period where followers of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam lived and worked together under a single administration. While much of Western Europe struggled to retain basic literacy, Al-Andalus was building a plural civilization. Its capital, Córdoba, featured paved streets and public libraries that housed books gathered from across the Mediterranean and the Middle East. Yet modern historians are divided over this legacy. Some point to the era as a high point of interfaith dialogue. Others argue that this vision of a peaceful utopia is a manufactured myth, recreated by 20th century historians to serve a specific national narrative. Uncovering the reality of the society is about more than just history. By looking at how these 3 competing faiths actually manage to coexist, we see the mechanics of how cultures collaborate, even under significant pressure. The evidence for a successful coexistence starts with the state's political structure. In the 10th century, Caliph Abdur-Rahman III unified a diverse population by utilizing a meritocracy, placing talented individuals into government roles, regardless of their religious background. This manuscript illustrates the resulting cultural integration. You can see Hebrew script woven into the same artistic motifs used by the ruling Muslim class. This environment allowed the Jewish physician and diplomat Hasdai ibn Shaprut to rise to the position of vizier, managing international trade for the caliph. This political collaboration supported a massive intellectual effort. Scholars pooled their knowledge to translate the philosophical works of Aristotle and ancient Greek science into Arabic, Hebrew, and eventually Latin. This botanical manuscript shows the output of that collaboration. Scholars categorized local plant species with detail unseen since the fall of Rome. They documented medical properties, allowing doctors to move past vague theories and prescribe standardized dosages based on the actual flora of the region. This cross-cultural intellectual framework fueled a scientific expansion. Through shared research and translation, these scholars created a repository of knowledge that outpaced the scientific output of the rest of Europe. However, Al-Andalus was not a modern democracy with equal rights. The scientific progress of the elite often masked a rigid social hierarchy based on religious identity. Under the dhimmi system, Christians and Jews were protected peoples. They practiced their religion, but as second-class citizens, paid a tax called the jizya. The state guaranteed safety only in exchange for this tax and the acknowledgement of absolute Islamic dominance. This created a divide where interfaith harmony was mostly a luxury for the wealthy. The celebrated poets and philosophers worked together in the palaces, while the common people in the lower classes remained largely segregated. This tolerance was also subject to political shifts. In the 12th century, the rise of hardline dynasties like the Almohads ended this pragmatic era, forcing minority populations into exile or apostasy long before the final fall of Granada. The legendary utopia was heavily conditional. It was a society defined by high-level intellectual exchange, but also by economic inequality and a strict religious hierarchy. To understand Al-Andalus, we have to look past the extremes of the legend. Its significance doesn't come from being a perfect society, but from being a historically rare application of religious pluralism. It was a pragmatic experiment. By giving different religious groups a recognized place in the legal system, the state created an environment where competition for knowledge was more valuable than conflict. Because Al-Andalus protected these diverse communities, it became a cultural bridge. It provided the physical space where Greek and Byzantine ideas could be preserved and analyzed when they had been largely forgotten elsewhere. These translations didn't stay in Spain. From the 11th century, scholars from across Europe traveled to Toledo and Córdoba to study these texts. They carried this recovered mathematics back to northern universities, providing the foundations for the scientific rebirth of later centuries. The physical proof of this fusion remains in the hybrid architecture of Córdoba. These iconic arches prove that even after centuries of conflict, The cultures of the Mediterranean had become inextricably linked through their shared artistry and engineering. The history of Al-Andalus demonstrates the pragmatic value of intellectual exchange. When rival factions prioritize the circulation of ideas over isolation, they create a reservoir of knowledge that sustains civilizations long after political borders have collapsed.